Shout out to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. On October 1st, 2018, the Colorado Rockies and Los Angeles Dodgers met for a rare Game 163 to decide the National League West champions. It's a miracle that they reached this point. Because of runs scored and allowed, the Greek philosopher Pythagoras expected the Dodgers to be a 101-win team, while the Rockies were expected 85. Yet, in reality, they met in the middle with identical records of 91 wins and 71 losses. The better team won that day. The Dodgers, driven by a Cody Bellinger homer, grabbed the NL West crown, while the Rockies went to the wildcard game where they defeated the Cubs. Matched up in the NLDS against the Brewers, they floundered. Rocktober was canceled early as Colorado scored just 2 runs in 3 games. That offseason, Rockies GM Jeff Bridich and owner Richard L. Monfort cooked up a plan. They would give franchise cornerstone Nolan Arenado a large contract extension. But they wouldn't really mean it. No, the whole extension was a fraud. Here's why. Nolan Arenado might just be the best thing to happen to the Rockies this millennium. Since his 2013 rookie campaign, the 4-time Platinum Glove winner is 5th among position players in wins above replacement. His nickname is apparently Sandblaster, and his cousin is Josh Fuentes. Sorry, I'm just reading off his baseball reference page. Now, the absolute burden of having a good baseball player on your team is that after a while, they want a lot of money, and if you let them reach free agency, they usually go to a different team that's going to give them a lot of money. But when baseball geniuses Jeff Bridich and Dick Monfort stuck their heads together, they hatched a brilliant plan. They would get all the positive PR of extending Arenado without actually committing too much money from, you know, Dick's Meatpacking, and I'm demonetized. The key was an opt-out after the 2021 season. If Arenado opted out and pursued free agency, he'd forfeit the majority of the money. His 8-year, $260 million deal would simply become a 3-year, $96 million deal. This inclusion of an opt-out gives the player leverage. It's called a player option for a reason. Surely Nolan Arenado negotiated for this escape hatch himself, right? I'm about to read you perhaps the most shocking thing I've ever heard come out of a GM's mouth. Relating to the Arenado deal, Jeff Bridich said, "In those negotiations, I was the one who actually pushed for that opt-out." To Nolan's credit, he didn't have a ton of interest in that initially being there. It wasn't a priority of his for it to be there. I was the one who thought it might be a good idea. The Rockies front office didn't want Nolan Arenado, their franchise cornerstone, long-term, but they didn't want the backlash of letting him walk in free agency. No, they wanted Nolan Arenado to exercise the opt-out when he was 30 and try out the open market. And when the Rockies inevitably lost the bidding war, they could go to the Denver whatchamacallit and say, "Oh, we really wanted him to stay. That's why we extended him, but he chose to leave. You know, he's really not a nice guy." When it became clear that wasn't going to happen, they shipped him off plus $50 million in cash to St. Louis for an unimpressive prospect package and hoped that no one would notice. Unfortunately, baseball fans noticed that the Rockies paid $50 million to not have Nolan Arenado on their team. And although Arenado did want out of Denver, it was only because management had failed to build a winning ball club around him. In fact, Jeff Bridich's administration has failed to build anything at all. With hindsight, it's surprising that the Rockies grabbed wildcard spots in 2017 and 2018, because they might just be the first franchise to consistently make their team worse by spending on free agents. Over a stretch of 4 off-seasons following the 2015 season, the Rockies signed 8 free agents to multi-year deals: Gerardo Parra, Jason Mott, Ian Desmond, Mike Dunn, Wade Davis, Jake McGee, Brian Shaw, and Daniel Murphy. During their following tenures in a Rockies uniform, they all generated a negative wins above replacement total. The Rockies spent $256 million for -8 WAR. Mind you, the entire Arenado extension was $260 million. The The Rockies won't end up spending $260 million on Arenado because they traded him, but they shelled out that same amount for below replacement level production. The warning signs were there for many of these players. Daniel Murphy could no longer play second base and wasn't hitting well enough to deserve a multi-year deal as a first baseman. The Ian Desmond signing was even more confounding for some of the same reasons. Desmond was a shortstop turned center fielder who was signed by the Rockies to play first base? He was roughly a league average hitter leading up to free agency, but league average hitting isn't very good at first base. That's not how any of this works. They gave 31-year-old Ian Desmond a 5-year deal. He retired after 3. In the 2 years leading up to his signing, Mike Dunn was a 4 ERA, 4 FIP guy in Miami's cavernous ballpark. Is it really that shocking that he was a 6 ERA, 5 FIP guy in Coors? How does that guy get a 3-year deal? I don't want to be so critical of a team spending money, but you'd think at some point they would have accidentally signed Charlie Morton or Carlos Santana, just someone good by pure chance. Why did Mike Moustakas have to take a 1-year deal back to the Royals after setting their single-season franchise home run record? Could the Rockies not have converted Moustakas to first base instead of Ian Desmond and Daniel Murphy? Look, sometimes deals don't work out. Sometimes you trade for Stanton and he can't stay healthy. Sometimes you give Jason Hayward a bunch of money and he forgets how to hit for 3 seasons. Sometimes you give 3 pitchers $500 million and you win a World Series. Wait, sorry, that one actually worked. The point is, those deals at least made sense at the time. Not these Rockies deals. Of course, free agent spending is just one part of building a team. Jeff Bridich took over as the Rockies GM following the 2014 season, taking over for Dan O'Dowd. The last good Rockies team came 4 years later in 2018. Here's the 12 players that accumulated at least one Fangraphs win above replacement on the 2018 Rockies. When Dan O'Dowd resigned, Arenado, Blackmon, LeMahieu, Ottavino, and Cargo were already on the team. And then in the farm system, the Rockies already had Story, Freeland, Gray, Anderson, Oberg, and Dahl. So really, besides Marquez, the Rockies won with Dan O'Dowd's guys, not Bridich's guys. Now, the Bridich regime does deserve some credit for acquiring Marquez. Marquez is probably the best starting pitcher in the history of the franchise. He's the only Rockies pitcher with 4 qualified seasons of 100 ERA plus or better. He and Max Kepler are definitely the best German players in MLB. In terms of roster construction, the Rockies have been, and this is a nice way of putting it, driven by their stars. The mean way of putting it is that they've had maybe 4 good players and a bunch of randos. If you were to just look at the top 2 hitters and top 2 pitchers from each NL West team over the past couple seasons, you'd expect the Rockies to be in contention with the Dodgers. By these measures, Story, Arenado, Marquez, and Gray have been a comparable package to Bellinger, Muncy, Buehler, and Kershaw. Unfortunately, the rest of the team's production has been below replacement level, negative 1.3 wins above replacement over the last 2 seasons for all Rockies players not named Story, Arenado, Marquez, and Gray. Part of this is that Colorado just hasn't fixed any of their problems. In the last 6 seasons, their first basemen have collectively put up an 88 WRC+. This is a park-adjusted stat where 100 is average. That's worst in the league. But wait, there's more. Their catchers have also been worst in the league once you adjust for Coors Field with a stat like WRC+. They've been hemorrhaging wins at these positions with no end in sight. Being a fan of the Rockies is kinda like living in a mud hut with no plumbing and a really nice TV. But the TV is really not useful to you, so you give the TV to a guy in St. Louis in return for some rice? Nolan Arenado's the TV, you get it, you're smart. The point is, they created this situation. They couldn't build jack squat around their good players, so it actually makes sense to trade them. Not just Arenado, but hopefully Story and Marquez too. Tear it down, because things won't get better until the organization looks itself in the mirror and says, "We are the Rockies, and we play in Coors Field." That's really what so much of this is about. Coors. You spend a bunch of money on the Royals bullpen, it doesn't go great. Oh well, it's Coors. The offense is crazy. DJ LeMahieu starts playing near sea level and is a better park-adjusted hitter than ever before. Oh well, it's Coors. The offense is crazy. See, what the Rockies shouldn't do is play copycat. They tried to be like the Royals, who were very successful as Bridich took over, and they failed. Their playing environment is exceptional. What works for others won't work for them. What works in Coors Field? For pitching, it's generally four-seam fastballs and sliders. That's German Marquez, that's 2018 Kyle Freeland, that's Scott Oberg, that's Daniel Bard. You know what doesn't fare well in Coors? Almost everything else. Wade Davis and Brian Shaw's cutters? Didn't work. Jon Gray's curveball? He threw it way more on the road when he was getting acclimated. It's really hard to pitch in Coors. They've relied on sinker ballers in the past, but the real answer may lie in the Magnus effect. High backspin four-seamers and high topspin fastballs seem to defy gravity, but pitches in Coors have less Magnus force due to the high elevation. Pitchers can't rely on their spin to produce as much movement. This means lower spin might actually be good. German Marquez's fastball is 86th percentile in velocity, yet 24th percentile in spin rate. But it works. He's the best pitcher in franchise history. Jon Gray's fastball has similar characteristics as well. And what happens when those balls get hit? Because of the thin air and massive size of the stadium, a batted ball is far more dangerous in Coors than any other venue in the league. Arenado and Story are great defenders, but the massive outfield is where the Rockies lose extra base hits. If they could have stolen one thing from the Royals, it shouldn't have been the bullpen. It should have been prioritizing rangy outfielders like Alex Gordon, Lorenzo Cain, and Jarrod Dyson to cover all that ground. Instead, they gave Charlie Blackmon a big extension when he was 31. Yeah, he can hit, but he's a terrible fit for that ballpark defensively. As a center fielder in 2018, he put up by far the worst defensive run save total in the league. There's potential to rebuild this team from the ground up with Coors Field in mind, but the Rockies just don't get it. In a sea of smart baseball organizations, they're clueless. Before COVID, owner and CEO Dick Monfort stated that the Rockies would win 94 games in 2020. That's not optimism, that's ignorance. Don't just think of him as the owner, this is the CEO. That's the same position Derek Jeter has with the Marlins. The logical conclusion is this: there's no hope for the Rockies until Bridich is gone and Monfort is willing to be less hands-on, but the two are still attached to each other. In a weird bit of post-Arenado trade groveling, Monfort stated that he hadn't thought about firing Bridich, rather, himself. He should think about firing both because they've ran this team into the ground. Not only have the Dodgers and Padres built super teams, the D-backs and Giants are positioning themselves to be great in the future. The Rockies should start over fresh because they stink. Sorry for my language. Squarespace gives you a powerful and beautiful online platform to create your own website. They make it easy to connect with your audience, generate revenue through members-only content, send emails, and leverage audience insights. With Squarespace, you can display your social media posts on your site and auto-post your website content back to social media. The platform now has Squarespace extensions, which are new third-party e-commerce tools to help you promote, sell, and ship your products all over the globe. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/foolishbaseball to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.